Welcome to Dark Sites, and today we are covering 5 forgotten dark sites. If it's popular, I might turn this into a series covering the forgotten, the lesser known, and anything a bit left field in the wide and varied world of dark sites. So, let's begin. Number 5. The Underground, Pennsylvania. Iron Mountain Inc. is an American information management service company, founded in 1951 and headquartered in Boston, Massachusetts. It provides records management, data backup, and data recovery services, which are used by over 2,300 companies and 200,000 customers worldwide. But its most impressive facility is simply known as the Underground, a 1.7 million square foot fortress, 220 feet below ground, a high security storage facility in a former limestone mine at Boyers, Pennsylvania. Behind its rings of physical and electronic security on the surface, behind a 3-ton blast door, lie temperature-controlled vaults, guarded by armed security and emergency response systems, 365 days a year. The Underground is rumoured to be nuclear strike resistant, and Iron Mountain openly brag it is flood, hurricane and earthquake proof. But apart from a few tours for news articles and promotional downloads, Iron Mountain, understandably, remains tight-lipped about the exact nature and scale of all its facilities. Though it's worth noting, potential customers can book a tour of the facility known as the Underground. So, what do they store at the Underground? Government records, corporate documents, master recordings of legendary artists, master recordings of major global sporting events, and the last will and testaments of kings, queens, presidents, and tyrants. But because of the nature of its work, Iron Mountain tends to be a bit vague on the exact details. But, luckily for us, a few of Iron Mountain's and the Underground users have been more vocal than others. Perhaps the most famous example is TKO, the owners of World Wrestling Entertainment, formerly the World Wrestling Federation, and the Ultimate Fighting Championship. They keep a portion of their corporate information and match archives in Iron Mountain facilities across America. TKO own the largest archive of combat sports and professional wrestling media in the world. So remember, should the world be struck by nuclear war or an asteroid, the Mona Lisa may be destroyed, but The Rock vs. Stone Cold Steve Austin at WrestleMania 17 will be saved for posterity. Number 4. Codfish Island. Now we head to New Zealand to a 5.5 square mile island that tops out at 820 feet tall. Why? Well, we're going to have to go back in time a bit. Ever since humans arrived in New Zealand, we've been collectively doing a number on the native flora and fauna. Invasive species we brought with us as well, such as cats, dogs, rats or wallaby, have made the situation far worse. One such animal that suffered is the kakapo, that went from New Zealand's third most common bird to the verge of extinction by the 20th century. By 1970, it was uncertain if the kakapo was extinct or not, and a final all-or-nothing effort was launched to save it. Numerous searches and studies later, it was concluded that perhaps as few as 100 remained. A kakapo recovery plan was hurriedly developed. Several islands were selected, all predators and invasive species would be removed, and every kakapo that could be found in the wild would be relocated to make one last desperate stand in as isolated and safe location as possible. New laws were drafted to make access by the general public illegal, and information campaigns drawn up to stress the importance of these sanctuaries. The most famous of these islands would be Codfish Island. So, you want to see this miracle of conservation in action. Firstly, good luck, and secondly, you probably already have. Over the years, several documentaries have documented the struggle to save the kakapo of Codfish Island, most famously the BBC series Last Chance to See. But you still want to see a Codfish Island in person. Well, access is only available to scientific researchers, along with volunteers working on conservation programs. Occasionally, permits may be issued to film crews and others to visit, but if you're lucky enough to get one, you'll have to go through a quarantine period and have everything you take to the island checked for invasive hitchhikers, plant seeds, bugs, or any other potentially invasive species that could disrupt the conservation program. You will arrive by helicopter or light aircraft onto the beach, and from the accounts I've read, it's a rather hair-raising experience. Unauthorised landing is prohibited, and if you're stupid enough to try, you risk a severe penalty and gaining international notoriety on social media. Most years, the number of people who go to Codfish Island isn't that much more than going to space or to an Antarctic research station such as McMurdo. This is with good reason. In 1999, the kakapo had to be evacuated due to the discovery of an invasive rat population on the island. 2004 saw a mystery blood poisoning infection hit the island, and in 2019 the island was hit by a fungal respiratory disease that made a significant dent in the kakapo population. But despite its isolation, Codfish Island does have one celebrity. This is Sirocco, one of the 244 kakapo holding on in the wild, New Zealand's official spokesbird for conservation, social media star, and the bird that helped create TV gold on Last Chance to See, and the phrase, "You're being shagged by a rare parrot." Number 3. CDE Nancekuke, Devon and Cornwall. The two rugged, remote and beautiful counties at the very southwestern tip of the British Isles have always been a haven for adventurers and tourists. The very qualities that attract surfers, hikers and tourists every summer also attract the British government when they have something they want to keep away from prying eyes. Chemical defence establishment Nancekuke was one such site. CDE Nancekuke was located on the North Cornish coast near the tourist village of Portreath. Perranporth, Newquay, Redruth and Camborne, centres of tourism, surfing and industry are all nearby. From 1940 until 1950, Nancekuke was home to RAF Portreath. Throughout World War II, the base was home to British, American, Canadian, Czechoslovakian and Polish squadrons at various points, mostly fighter, transport or maritime squadrons. But from 1950 until 1980, it took on its most infamous role. Between 1950 and the site's mothballing in the late 50s, approximately 20 tonnes of the Nerge agent sarin and an unknown amount of the Nerge agent VX, described as small batches in most sources, were produced. All through the 60s and 70s, the site was kept in a state whereby production of chemical weapons could easily recommence if needed, while some stockpiles of the manufactured nerve agents remained at the base until its eventual closure in the late 70s. By 1980, the RAF reopened the site and used it for small arms testing and establishing the radar facilities that now cover the southwestern approaches to the British Isles. The former CDE Nancekuke was largely demolished, but it would remain one of Cornwall's most contaminated and potentially dangerous sites. The former CDE site was covered with ancient mine shafts and quarries. Meanwhile, large amounts of waste from the site was processed and in need of disposal, and I think you can see how this ends. During the site's operation and closure, effluent and waste from the manufacture of chemical weapons were dumped into 5 abandoned mines. The CDE also discovered any outfall from the site, where effluent was discharged into a sea cave to disperse into the sea. What exactly was dumped? Well, in official records, the dumps labelled A, D and E were labelled as, and I quote, "sites not to be disturbed," while dumps B and C contained, amongst other things, white asbestos, the banned pesticide DDT, mercury, arsenic and uranium nitrate. Investigations in the year 2000 reveal most of this waste was contained in nothing more than tightly packed plastic bags. Ever since 1950, but particularly in 1969, hundreds of marine animals have died around the site without any explanation. Locals raised concerns for many years regarding the safety of the site and the mystery surrounding the chemicals used and produced. To the alarm of the public, it was a poorly guarded local secret. Chemicals were transported across the tourist-swamped roads of North Cornwall during the height of summer. But in an example of a double-edged sword, the factory was also a major local employer. But chemical exposure over time affected local residents and former workers to the point it was raised in the House of Commons in the year 2000. Today the site is known as Remote Radar Head Portreath, or RRH Portreath. Due to its importance to Britain's defence, it is one of the most secure sites in Devon and Cornwall. It is also subject to ongoing monitoring, which began in the year 2000 and is set to be undertaken until at least 2050. The 5 dumps across the site are designated no-build areas. They remain off-limits to the general public and can only be accessed by trained chemical weapons experts of the Defence Science Technology Laboratory during regular monitoring work. The biggest fear of the residents and the experts alike is that the witch's brew of chemicals from the dumps may leak into a mine drainage tunnel and find its way into the open ocean. Number 2. Command Post Tango, South Korea. Command Post Tango is the command post for the South Korean US Combined Forces Command and the State Department of Korea in the event of war on the Korean Peninsula or a major global conflict. The command post was built shortly after the Korean War and is one of several such US military command posts scattered across the globe in Europe, America, Hawaii, and the Far East. The underground bunker is built to withstand a direct hit by a tactical nuclear weapon and is rumoured to be able to survive a near miss by a larger strategic device. In terms of size, it covers over 300,000 square feet and is carved out of the bedrock with reinforced concrete walls, with access being gained through a series of steel blast doors. Though the exact location remains a secret, it was officially disclosed in 2005 that it existed, and it is roughly in the mountains south of Seoul in a complex that contains a large military base and a runway. Though I should point out at this time, the sat-nav app Waze apparently knows its address, as its location is the second result if you Google Command Post Tango. The bunker is one of those glorious secrets that everyone knows its location, but no one in the South Korean or US government will admit to its location. But they are quite happy, on the other hand, to give Wall Street Journal and other journalists a tour around the bunker as part of news reports. I'll put a link to one in the description. Though the exact details of the base are obviously vague, we do know some of its facilities and its role. Its military role is to provide command and control facilities for America, South Korea, and Allied forces during major exercises, in the event of war on the Korean Peninsula or another major conflict in the area. Its political role as a State Department of Korea site means it can, in the event of a conflict or a major national emergency, provide command and control to the levers of government, ranging from the emergency services to civil servants, essentially fulfilling the role of a national command post. Command Post Tango has facilities to control anything that might be relevant in a major conflict or national emergency. But what facilities, I hear you cry? Now, this is a bit of a vague list because the bunker is still highly secret. It is equipped with telecommunications facilities for local, regional and international communication with military and political assets, as well as national governments. Other known facilities include, though this list is far from complete, a water treatment operation centre, living quarters, sanitation blocks, food prep areas, a operations location for the Korean Emergency Response Centre, and storage facilities for enough food to last at least 2 months. Other known structures include buildings for external security personnel, a live firing range, several helicopter landing zones, a container storage area, a barracks for the joint US-Korean infantry company that protects the bunker, and buildings for all the staff who maintain or might one day inhabit the bunker on a day-to-day basis. Interestingly, it apparently hosts a compartmentalised information facility where American, but not South Korean service members, can access information gathered by the CIA, NSA, and the Defense Intelligence Agency. We have no information on whether a similar compartmentalised South Korean section exists. But what of Command Post Tango today? It is currently undergoing its biggest change since its construction. The US will transfer the bunker to the South Korean government control when a relocation program of US bases on the Korean Peninsula is completed, but the exact time frame has not been set, with US Forces headquarters moving further south to Camp Humphreys, the largest US base in Korea, and the largest outside the United States, located roughly 40 miles or 66 kilometres south of Seoul. No information has been released on the construction of a similar command and control bunker for US forces at Camp Humphreys. While the Korean president officials regularly visit Command Post Tango, South Korea has yet to take full control of the facility. And at number 1, Runit Island. Runit Island has become the centre of political squabbles between nations, a legal war between American veterans and the US government, and a ticking clock towards a potential disaster known as Pacific's Chernobyl. It's all thanks to this, the Cactus Dome, or as locals call it, the Tomb. Thanks to its contents, living on the island is impossible. In this Pacific paradise you do not grow crops, you do not eat the coconuts, and you never drink the water. Chances are the poison leaking from the dome will eventually kill you, if cancer or leukemia don't get to you first. But let's start at the beginning. The United States conducted a series of nuclear tests on Enewetak Atoll in the Marshall Islands between 1946 and 1958. Eventually, Uncle Sam realised they would have to clean up the mess. When they realised dumping nuclear material deep out at sea was illegal and could cause an international incident, a new solution was agreed upon. They would create a massive nuclear dump. They decided to use the crater created by the cactus test, which was an 18-kiloton atomic device. Construction of the Runit Dome began in 1977 and was completed by 1980. Topsoil and nuclear waste from 6 separate islands and more waste material, approximately 130 tons worth, from test sites in Nevada, totaling at least 100,000 cubic yards or 35 Olympic swimming pools, was dumped into the crater. This included plutonium-239 with a half-life of 24,000 years. The crater was then sealed with a concrete cap, 115 metres, 377 feet in diameter, and 48 centimetres or 18 inches thick. Almost immediately afterwards, things began to go wrong. Approximately 6,000 army personnel who constructed the dome told a terrifying story. When the public relations cameras were rolling or dignitaries visited, out came the radiation suits, respirators, air monitoring equipment, and medical test kits. When they weren't visiting, veterans talk of being told how the site presented no health risks. They could wear nothing but shorts and sun caps handling the material, and how it was essentially a 6-month tropical vacation. Then reports of the project's funding and build quality began to follow. In the words of the US Congress at the time, all reasonable economies should be realised in the accomplishment of this project. Veterans worked 10 to 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, painstakingly removing 6 inches of radioactive topsoil from the islands, breathing in the deadly powder, a mixture of sand and fallout along the way. Records show that protective equipment was missing or unusable. Troops requested respirators but couldn't get them. Cut-rate safety monitoring systems regularly failed. Officials assured concerned members of Congress by listing safeguards that didn't actually exist, and the movement of heavy equipment was not monitored. Meanwhile, the most common work tool was the simple shovel. The dome itself was built with no structural support and no protective lining inside the crater. The veterans were simply ordered to mix the radioactive topsoil with concrete, dump it into the crater, cap it with a concrete slab, and job done. The human cost and legal battles began almost immediately. Of the 6,000 veterans, only approximately 400 are still alive today. They suffered a horrendous illness rate, including such diseases as brittle bone, cancer, and birth defects in their children. The majority are already dead. Many still alive are riddled with cancers or simply waiting for cancer to come. But what of the inhabitants of Nancekuke Atoll? Testing era reports exist of children playing in the fine radioactive fallout, believing it to be snow, while the fallout spread over the islands and the seafloor between them, polluting the food chain. Researchers until this day report background radiation levels on some islands that are far higher than in areas affected by Chernobyl or the Fukushima nuclear disasters. Medical conditions such as miscarriages, cancers, leukemias, stillbirths and thyroid tumours are common. Also, what the locals refer to as jellyfish babies have been reported. Infants born without bones, legs, arms, essentially nothing, and with transparent skin. Few of them live beyond a day or two, mercifully. Many women also die from abnormal pregnancies. Those that survive the experience, they give birth to what they refer to in one medical report as strands of purple grapes, which are quietly buried as soon as possible. When in 1983 the Marshall Islands separated from the United States after the US military withdrew from the region, it paid a full resettlement of all claims, past, present and future, relating to the nuclear test program. This led to the United States concluding it was released from any responsibility for past nuclear testing. Well, obviously the Marshall Islands doesn't have the money to build a multi-billion-dollar clean-up facility or deal with the skyrocketing rates of cancers and other diseases related to radiation. The cherry on the cake? The tube is leaking and beginning to fail. Throughout the decades, storms and the shifting nature of the islands has caused cracks to appear in the dome with increasing regularity, while seawater has begun to infiltrate into the unlined and unprotected mixture of radioactive material and concrete inside the crater. Despite occasionally popping up in the news, most recently in 2019 when the US Congress demanded a report on the situation from the US Department of Energy that essentially concluded the problem was exaggerated, and in 2024 when the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres voiced his concerns and probably sent a strongly worded letter at the same time. The US continues to drag its feet, fight every legal challenge, and deny at every stage any responsibility for cleaning up its mess. The Atomic Cleanup Vets Association and Children of Atomic Veterans Association continue to fight for justice, but as one veteran put it in an interview in 2019, all this is delay, 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 until we die. In the words of President Hilda Heine of the Marshall Islands, "We don't want it, we didn't build it, the garbage inside is not ours." Runit Island, the place the US government told the inhabitants and its own veterans, "Not my problem."